We love Classical Conversations.
Your organization is known worldwide, and we certainly appreciate every facet that you do.
I do believe in what you're doing because I've seen it in my family.
I'm so excited about all the things that, Robert, you guys do with Classical Conversations. It's been a huge blessing for our family.
Grateful for the work at Classical Conversations. You're a leader, and you have been in this movement for a long time.
I do feel like I have a debt of gratitude to you, your family, all of CC for just the fruit that has come from CC.
Appreciate all that you guys do, both through this wonderful podcast and also through Classical Conversations, which I am convinced is the best education resource out there. Thank you very much for all that you do for the cause of Christ and for our families and for our children. Really, really appreciate it.
Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today I am continuing my conversation with Mark Hancock. He's the CEO of Trail Life USA. He was on episode 38, so definitely go check that out. He is the author of the books, Why Are We Sitting Here Until We Die, as well as 2 booklets, Let Boys Be Boys, 3 Winning Strategy for Leaders of Boys, and 5 Critical Needs of Boys. He has been on Fox Nation, Family Life Radio, James Dobson Family Talk program. And Mark, in 2017, was named the American Family Association's 40 Faithful. He's an author, award-winning writer, conference speaker, and he is the CEO of Trail Life USA. He lives near Greenville, South Carolina. You might have needed to use some of your skills for that hurricane earlier this year, either whether personally or for friends. You're married with 2 sons. So, Mark, welcome back to the show.
Robert, it's great to be with you today.
Now, not to dive too deep into Trail Life, but tell us just a little bit about that, and then let's talk about what are some of the needs that boys have that are different from girls and what we're seeing in culture today and how parents can address that?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. First, Trail Life USA is a Christ-centered, boy-focused character leadership and adventure organization for boys, kindergarten through 12th grade. For you folks in CC world, that's 5 years old to 17 years old. You know this, Robert. We raised 2 homeschooled sons who are both active in Classical Conversations, and so we're very familiar with what we do, and we know the language of the homeschools. In fact, 60% of the boys in Trail Life USA are homeschooled. We have about 62,000 members across the country, all 50 states, over 1,200 churches participating with Trail Life USA. And it's, what you'd expect from an outdoor boys organization: camping, hiking, patrols, uniforms, handbooks, awards, all that stuff, except that big difference. We are Christ-centered and boy-focused, and that makes us different from Boy Scouts. But I love the subject today, talking about some of the challenges in this new era of what men and boys are facing. We feel like we've had over 100,000 men come through Trail Life USA in our 10-year history, and so I feel like that's something that we've got a little bit of experience and we can talk about that. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, we've been in and out of Trail Life a few times with my kids, just based on seasons and what's going on, and we've always enjoyed it, and it's just been a great blessing to us and our family. So, one of the things that our culture says is boys and girls aren't different. Do you agree? And if not, how are they different?
Yeah, well, great question. Boys and girls are different. That'll get you canceled on some podcasts, but I know I can say that here. But every legitimate science, or if we're interested in that, every legitimate science points to the fact that boys and girls are different. Biologically, psychologically, developmentally, just different. Their eyes are different, their ears are different, their brains are different, developmentally they're different. They're just, it's not a value statement. Boys aren't any better than girls. They're just different in the way that they're constructed. And that makes sense when you understand that we have a divine designer. It makes sense that these roles were created and we are part of what is the creation of man and women. And so we celebrate that in Trail Life. We recognize that difference, and we've created a program that's specifically aimed at boys.
Now, what are some of the unique challenges of raising a boy today? Because they're probably way different than when I was being raised. And I've got 2 young kids. One just turned, or will be turning 8, and a 4.5-year-old. So, yeah. What are those things that we need to be wary of as parents?
Yeah, well, we've seen some severe changes over the last generation or so. In our effort to help girls catch up academically, girls used to to lag academically, in our effort to help meet their needs better, we design programs that are more aimed at girls and how girls learn. And as a result, boys are now twice as likely to be in special education, 3 times more likely to have ADHD. They fall behind girls in every single academic category. When we looked at it in the past, it was, okay, girls are lagging in science and math as the STEM subjects. And so we changed the way we deliver the education to help girls catch up. Not only they catch up, they just blew past boys, which is wonderful. I love all the progress that girls have made in education. But what we weren't paying attention to is that boys were lagging in language and social skills. And we didn't do anything to account for that or to help them catch up. And then, of course, recently, this COVID has done a terrible thing to boys, because if they're already struggling in their language and social skills, this virtual environment that we force them into is even scarier place for boys. And they're not catching on. They're just not getting it. And it's just really sad. So that's why I said we created this program that accounts for differences between boys and girls, because they are different. They learn differently. And the environments that they're in are primarily aimed for sit still, be quiet, pay attention, which girls, developmentally excel at when compared to boys. Boys are built to move. Harvard scientists tell us that they've got to move in order for their brains to be engaged. That boy sitting there at your dining room table, Mom, who's his knees bouncing up and down and the silverware is rattling, and he's telling you, if you want me here, you've got to take my movement too. I've got to stay moving in order to be engaged. And of course, we discourage them from that. Why can't you sit still like Susie? Well, if you want him engaged, he's going to have to move. That's what's built in him. So just some of those minor things, those differences between boys and girls are huge, end up being huge extensions, because they're constantly getting the message, why can't you sit still like the girls? Why can't you pay attention? Why aren't you smart as? Whatever, because developmentally, they just lag behind girls.
Yes, science of their brain development. I know Nancy Piercy, I think, talked a little bit about that. It's great that the girls have had these opportunities, but now we have a whole generation of men, and they've basically been told that girl behavior is good, boy behavior is bad. And then we wonder why we have gender dysphoria issues and things like that primarily seem to be going in the male to female direction, although there's some that go the other way. But yeah, it's not healthy. And I've even seen studies probably like a few years ago that said sitting is the new smoking and how bad sitting all day is for you. But we design education systems around sitting still and shutting up, and wonder why we're not having boys that are excited about learning about God's word or learning about science and these sorts of things. And you guys give an outlet for that, for those of us, for those who aren't homeschooling and for those who are, to be more intentional in raising men.
I like to tell our troop leaders, even though they're typically meeting at a church, the Trail Life Troop is an outreach of that local church, typically using the church building, but they're a ministry of that church. But I tell them, leaders, if those boys walk into that room and it looks like Sunday school or it looks like their school classroom, you've already lost them, because that's the environment that they're accustomed to going into and saying, I don't fit here. They don't get me here. This is a place I don't do well. And boys start out with that sense and they never catch up. And that's why they disengage. That's why we have now, I think it's 60-40 college enrollment, 60% girls, 40% boys, because they've just given up on education by then. They just don't fit there. So now more bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, doctoral degrees are going to girls than boys, because that educational system just does not feel like a place that they belong. I remember when the Boy Scouts first opened up and allowed girls to join the troops, there was a Boy Scout leader who was quoted as saying, we love having girls in our troop because they're so much smarter and better behaved. And I thought, he's right. But there's another place that boys are going to, and they're being told you're not as smart and you can't behave as well. And that's the world that boys are. Imagine, Robert, everywhere you go, you're getting the sense that you just don't quite belong there, just don't quite fit there. You can't quite get it right. You can't sit still enough. You can't pay attention enough. You can't concentrate enough, because you're just not designed to do that. And so boys are giving up in rapid numbers. And that's why we have this failure to launch today. By the time they get through with school, they've already decided they just don't quite fit.
So, what are some of the things we can do? What are ways that we can help boys become men and the men that God wants them to be versus, I'll say, the soy boys that maybe modern culture has tried to push on masculinity?
Yeah, well, to some degree, we have to celebrate who it is that they are. They're built to move. Their eyes are different. Like I said, their eyes are different. Their ears are different. Their brains are different. They're built to move. They're built to be interactive. They are built to be doers. And of course, it's a bell curve. Not every boy is the same, and not every girl is the same. But for the most part, these are very generalized statements, but they apply to the bell curve. They're built for this stuff, so we have to account for that. And it's really difficult. It takes a retraining on our part, and we've come through a generation where we think that if a boy is acting out, he just wants attention, and so we kind of got to ask the question: well, what's wrong with attention? Maybe we should just give him attention. Maybe that's okay, because boys want to be the leader, they want to be excelling, they want to be noticed, they want to be a part, and we just keep dismissing them, telling them they can't be quiet enough. So we have to allow for that kind of risk and competition or rambunctious nature of a boy. That is exactly what is converted into good, godly, strong men who would do things like storm the beaches of Normandy and free the world of tyranny, or get on top of a rocket ship and go to another planet, or in a ship and go across uncharted waters. Those are the sorts of things that we need to encourage in boys rather than discourage. The message that boys get, like there's some sort of a defective girl, is just really sad for them. What they have, the strengths that they have, we can recognize those and draw attention to them rather than try to get them to view those as being somehow toxic or they don't work, they don't fit here. Helping the boys understand the wonder of boys and the wonder of that draw towards risk and competition. Boys do not believe that there is a tree that should not be climbed. That's just the way that they are. And to understand that, to instead of glare at that and say, that boy just can't sit still. What if we begin to gaze at that and say, what a beautiful, wonderful creation that is, all that energy. And so to change the way we look at boys, we don't want to glare at them. We want to gaze at them until it becomes beautiful, until we say, wow, that is a wonderful creature God made there. Yes, he's interfering with my lesson plan. He's not able to sit still at the dinner table. He's not able to sit still doing his schoolwork at home, at school, wherever he is. But to gaze at that until it becomes beautiful for us, and understand that that's part of his design. And we make the changes in order to compensate and allow for that beautiful design, rather than force him to conform somehow to our girl design system.
Mm. Now, of course, raising our children, boys in faith, is there a different way that parents, because I think about like sitting down and studying the Bible, is there a different way that you think parents should approach faith and raising boys to understand the word of God? Is there a better way to do that than maybe what we see in a Sunday school class?
Oh my gosh. I don't know of anybody who does that better than CC. The opportunity for boys to be, engaged in their own education, the foundations program. I remember going through that with my son, and the opportunity he had to stand up and be a part, participate, and do stuff and work with his hands. It wasn't just still be quiet, pay attention. We have to pursue those opportunities. We can't. When my wife and I first started homeschooling, we went to a surplus sale that the school board had, and we bought 2 student desks. I took them home and I sanded them and painted them and varnished the wooden seats. You remember those old ones, the wooden tabletops, and set them in the room because we were going to have school. And it wasn't long before we realized this just doesn't work for boys. And so they did their best learning, hanging upside down on the couch or out in the field or under a tree or in a park or something like that. That's where they did the best learning, which, by the way, they both ended up going, academic scholarships, because of that type of education. So we have to accept that it's not going to be learning as usual for them, and we have to accommodate that stuff. And the same applies to our biblical training of them. The Bible talks about, Deuteronomy talks about, along the way, and we teach them along the way. If you're going to sit your son down and say, okay, we're going to spend this next 15 minutes and we're going to read this scripture together until you get it pounded into your head, you've already lost him. But along the way, if you can help and encourage him through the sorts of things, through movement, motion, engaging him, all the kinesthetic forces that you can throw at that boy, that's where he's going to do his best learning. And that's where it's going to become part of him in his heart. We know these things, Robert. We know these things, but somehow we're influenced by a culture that says, oh, this is the proper way to do this. And it just isn't. As parents, we intuitively know what our boys need in order to learn. And, my youngest son, I remember driving along in the car. He was still in his car seat. And the younger one, who's 2 years behind the older one. And out of nowhere, he said his ABCs. We had never sat down and said, okay, A and then B and then C. We had never rehearsed that with him, but he just heard his brother doing it. And so while he was on the floor playing with something or fiddling with something, he was listening to his brother. He did not look like he was learning, but he was learning. And it's the same way with the biblical principles and our biblical. They're picking that stuff up along the way. We don't need that dedicated time. It's nice to have those dedicated times. It's certainly beautiful if a family can discipline itself to have dedicated times of learning, but they're picking up all the time. And that boy in particular, he doesn't look like he's learning, but he's learning. And they're engaging in so many channels at the same time. When I was growing up, I remember when they started showing the score on TV for football games. They used to just have a camera in the stands and it showed the field. And it's like, here, you're sitting in a seat, you're watching the game. And they added the score and it was so distracting for me. Now you watch a football game and there's all kinds of things going on. I mean, the yardage, the fantasy football stuff, what's coming on next. A little thing will pop up and tell you something else that you didn't want to know. All this stuff that's the world that boys are learning in. And it's the same way in our biblical education and in our regular education, our normal education are the same. But there are so many channels going once. If we try to restrict them to a single channel, now it's your Bible learning time. That's where we lose them because they're used to so many things coming at us at them at once. So we have to accept that they're learning along the path. They're learning along the way. They're constantly learning, and accept that is really the higher way of learning for boys.
Before we continue with today's episode, I'd like to tell you about all new offerings from classicalconversationsbooks.com. We've got the Math Map digits, integers, and monomials, fractions, in 2 new sets of math flashcards that'll offer simple, classical ways to practice essential math skills. Reasoning Together Philosophy will help your students to explore great thinkers, ideas, and seek truth through Socratic discussions, and the Copper Lodge Library adds 4 classics such as The Pilgrim's Progress with rich illustrations and Christian insights. You can explore all these product offerings and more at classicalconversations.com/what's new. That's classicalconversations.com/what's new. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, I think, for us, the Bible isn't separate from the rest of our lives. And so as a parent, integrating it, as much as possible and having that passion yourself and pointing it out can help them start picking it up, right? They're going to mimic and mirror what you do as an adult and as a parent.
Yeah. There's a popular expression that talks about some things that are caught rather than taught. And a lot of our biblical behavior, a lot of our values and things are caught. You can certainly sit them down and tell them, but it's not going to be as powerful as him watching.
Yeah. So let's talk about mentors a little bit. And I think about, great that so many women enter the teaching field and lead those things. But I think about, in school, those one-room schoolhouses and the prairie days, right? They were there, but during the summer when the harvest was, they were working hand in hand with their dad. They were learning a trade. They were being mentored by men who were working hard and teaching them a skill set. And, I don't think there's any offices, there's no corporations in the world that are letting men bring their teenage boys to work to help them learn the skills that they're doing now. So, how important is it for boys to have male mentors, and how do you go about finding them?
Yeah, that's extremely important. 1 in 4 boys now doesn't have a father in his household. 76% of public school teachers are female. 80-something% of Sunday school teachers are female. So girls have these wonderful role models. A single mom who's holding that family together, she's an amazing role model for that girl. The girl says, wow, there's somebody who's showing how it's done. Boys don't have that. A lot of boys don't have that example. And then they go to school and there's a female teacher at the front of the classroom. That girl can say, wow, that's what a leader looks like. And the boys don't have these examples. So boys are desperate for male mentorship. And it takes godly men to turn boys into godly men. As seed of the man that's in the boy has to be drawn forth, and it's the voice of a man, the example of a man who's in front of him doing that. That's why Trail Life USA, we're boy focused, we're male centered. At a certain age, it's all men who are engaging with those boys. Women can serve in all kinds of areas in our organization, but as far as troop contact, working with those boys, it's men, because boys need men in order to model themselves. You know, when you have a Supreme Court candidate who can't tell you what a woman is, imagine what a 10-year-old boy is facing when you try and answer the question, what is a man? He doesn't have an example anywhere in his life, or a rare example in his life. So it's critical that boys have examples of male leadership. And of course, we provide then Trail Life USA. Single moms love Trail Life USA because now it's a place that they can put their son and surrounded by godly men. We had a boy out in California recently. Robert came from a single mom household, and he stood in front of that company of men. He had just earned the Horizon Award, which you're familiar with. And he stood in front of that group of men, and he said, I need to thank the men in this room. Said, you taught me how to shave, and you taught me how to love Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if you're the single mom sitting there in that audience hearing your son say that, you were like, oh my gosh, we nailed it. You know, we got it. And so that sort of thing where a boy has a company of men, a band of brothers, someone that he can identify with in a male-centric environment, that's key to the boy. So there's other people that offer that too. Parents need to seek that out. Dads need to seek that out, because you can raise your son, certainly if you're influencing him, that's wonderful. It's beautiful. You are still the most powerful voice in his life. But if you can get in a company of men and show your son what it looks like to have a band of brothers, he'll always look for a band of brothers. And that's critical as he begins to move in other phases of life, where now he wants to learn how to be a good dad, or he wants to learn how to be a good husband. He can have men who are around him who can model for him how to do that. So if we can create for our boys the habit of being in a company of men in a male-centered environment to see what that looks like and feels like, that boy will always seek out his band of brothers.
Now, you hit on something, just like this male influence has kind of gone from our society in many ways as far as raising the kids. And so we've got this generation of dads, probably younger than I am, that may have experienced growing up without a father, maybe more than my generation, and certainly more than our generation have. You know, what are some things that, as dads who may have not had these examples in our lives, like how do we build ourselves up? I always think of, like, when you're flying on an airplane, put your oxygen mask on first before you help someone else, because if you're not in a spot to be helpful, you know, if you're not prepared, it's very difficult to lead someone where you haven't been. So yeah, what are some resources or things you can tell dads to do?
Yeah, it really does take godly men to grow godly men. And we do need to pay attention. In fact, we've just started an initiative called Fathers and Families, where we're focusing on developing the next generation of fathers, because we've recognized, after having over 100,000 come through our program, how vital it is and how important it is for boys to have good and godly men. So we're taking those men and we're reminding them of who they are. Of course, there's so many places for men to go today and be shamed. Even our men's conferences sometimes can be shaming for men. You know, you need to pray more. You need to date your wife. You need to be a better dad. You need to have a home Bible study. You need to pull out your guitar and play around the kitchen. You know, men are just, you're not doing it good enough. Not doing it good enough. Not doing it good enough. We get that constantly as men. And so we've taken on this initiative to remind men of who they are. We recognize that men have inherent superpowers that are put there by God, and to remind them that they have those superpowers because the culture has taken so much out. So men are able to do things like show up in an emotional way, in a physical way, put their phones aside, and in a relational way. Men are able to connect with one another. Men are able to connect with their kids. Men are able to connect with their wives, but they've kind of forgotten that skill. Men, in other superpowers, men have this X-ray vision that they need to be reminded that they have, where they can look beyond the behavior of their son or beyond the behavior of their daughter and see what's really going on inside. You know, that boy who's misbehaving, he's not giving you a hard time. He's having a hard time. And so we're reminding dads that they are able to see beyond that boy's behavior and say, what's really going on, and engage at that level. So to have that sort of awareness of oneself and the superpowers that a man has, he already has them. He just needs to be reminded that he has them and use them again, because God has given them to him. He has to use those superpowers in order to influence the next generation. So it's all there. We know how to do it. We just be reminded of how to do it. But just those two superpowers that I've given you, showing up and X-ray vision, those are huge, particularly for dads in raising the next generation.
Now, what Trail Life's been around for a while. Like, how have you seen it morph or changed? And how are you seeing the growth of the students? I think about CC, and it takes a while to start getting alumni and graduates and seeing the fruit of your labor. Like what are you seeing from these students that have stuck with Trail Life and going through? Because you always hear about Eagle Scouts, and we know that whole system's it's still a wonderful thing, a great accomplishment. I'm not trying to speak down on that, but that system they're in is not what it used to be. So what is Trail Life seeing from y'all's graduates now?
And I love that question, because we are seeing, we're just 11 years old. Our highest award is called the Freedom Award, and it's actually more difficult to receive than the Eagle, and it has some faith elements, of course, that you're not going to find in the Eagle, and has our Family Man badge. Takes a biblical approach to what a family looks like and what a father looks like in the household. So the boys that we're seeing who are completing that award, they're just amazing young men, and they're already giving back. We are now old enough to where boys who join the organization as a 5-year-old fox, are now receiving the Freedom Award. So they have been through the entire program, from Fox to Hawk to Mountain Lion to Navigator to Adventure. You're familiar with all these things, and have come through the program. I read, one of the things that they do as part of the Freedom Award is they write a life ambition essay. I read every single one of those essays, Robert, and I get to see the product of the young man that we're investing in, as he's sharing his dreams, what he's learned in Trail Life. And so we're seeing the results, we're seeing the product of what it is that we're doing. These boys who've been in the program for years now and are celebrating, are proud of themselves for what it is that they've achieved. And they're also talking about their future. And so I get to read these letters, and it's powerful, because like, man, we're doing this. This is happening. These boys' lives are changed. So many essays that I read will say, I thought that I was going to be a whatever, but after Trail Life, I've really discovered that what I'd like to do is such and such. By giving these opportunities, exposing the different frontiers, we're producing this generation of young man who is really going for it. He's understanding his own capabilities. So now we're seeing those young men come back and be leaders of troops and participating in troops and giving back. And of course, those younger men, in particular, those 17, 18, 19-year-old guys who are coming back, they're like heroes to that 5-year-old boy. They're even more so than the 40-year-old dad. That 17, 18-year-old Freedom Rangeman is just like the world to that 5, 6, 7-year-old boy. So they have the opportunities to give back. We're in Boy Scouts, which is an amazing program, by the way, incredible legacy. My oldest son, Eagle Scout, we were involved before they kind of lost their way. That incredible achievements there, but they would break. They have the Cub Scouts, and then after that, you got to go find another group to join. In Trail Life, you start at 5 years old, and you go all the way up through 17 years old till you become an adult, and you're in the same troop. You're growing up in the same group of boys. You're also in the same room as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, not in the same room, but in the same building as those 5 and 6-year-old boys, and you get to go back and teach them how to tie the knots, or how to learn a certain skill, or how to approach a certain value, or how to maybe memorize a scripture, or work on your Worthy Life Award, those sorts of things. So boys have opportunities for leading other young men, and that leadership opportunity, there's not many places for it in our culture today, for boys to go back and lead other boys, and except maybe in gangs. But we're doing it in Trail Life and seeing some amazing results.
Yeah, no, it's so important to be intentional with boys and give them that experience. And yeah, I just didn't even think about that mentorship opportunity, rarely happens. I mean, maybe a little bit in high school sports where you've got a senior and a freshman or something like that, but there's probably a lot more negative things going on in that relationship than the, spiritual formation and faith and physical formation that you see in the Trail Life troops. So
Well, just the
Mark-
experience of leadership and present. And I know in classical conversations, my boys learned how to stand in front of their peers and deliver a presentation. That impacted them as they became leaders in Boy Scouts and later in Trail Life, because they were able to stand before that group of boys and give instruction. What an amazing experience they get in CC, and we just build upon that in Trail Life.
That's great. So if someone's listening to our show today, where can they connect with you, or where can they get the Trail Life materials, find a local troop, or if there's not a local troop, start one, I assume. Give us the details.
Yeah, traillifeusa.com. Trail Life, 2 L's in the middle, traillifeusa.com. If you go to Get Connected, there's a tab there to find a troop. It's a map of the United States. You put in your zip code, it'll show you the troops that are nearby, and you click on it, contact one of them, say, hey, can we come by, or what time do you meet, or is it okay if we come visit? And then if you don't have a troop in your area, it shows you how to start a troop. Our 10-year goal is to have a Trail Life troop within 30 miles of 90% of the boys in the United States. We're at 80-something%, but we really want to get there. We want every boy to have the opportunity to participate in a Trail Life troop. We know not every boy will, but we want every boy to have the opportunity to participate in a Trail Life troop. So you can find out about that at traillifeusa.com, how to find a troop and how to start a troop.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for being on the show today. That's traillife.com, 2 L's in the middle. And of course, we'll put all those links in the show notes, and go pick up some of Mark's wonderful materials. I know as a father, raising 2 boys and a girl, that there's some really valuable resources out there for you to reinforce what that God-given ability already is. So, Mark, God bless you, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Robert, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
If you've enjoyed today's episode of Refining Rhetoric, please share it with a friend. Go check out the website, and just be intentional with raising your children. Until next time, God bless.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.